internet, so it's nice to see you all high up the back there. My name is Pete Malicki. Hi, come on in, please. Come on in, grab a seat. I think most of you probably know me because I'm running the Short+Sweet Sydney Theatre Festival. I am also Short+Sweet's literary manager, so I handle all of their script entries. I am a published fiction author and playwright. I work as an editor. I've run a publishing company. I've had short stories, a novel, many articles, plays published. I've had over 100 productions of my plays. Basically, I'm someone who has been very, very active in the writing industry and have learned a lot about it. Before I start, I might just show you a publication of my play Room that has been published by King Street Theatre's owner, Marcus Weber. He runs a company called Emu Scripts. So I might just pass this around, and while I'm talking, you can have a little bit of a gaze through. Just have a flick through, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. I've written a whole bunch of subject areas we can talk about today. We have, about 85 minutes to talk about stuff. But before I start, I'd just like to kind of get an idea of what you guys are interested in talking about today, or what you do as writers, so I can focus on that. Can I get an indication of, does anyone want to tell me what their interests are?
Any form of writing. I haven't written a novel, but I've written all the other forms.
Okay.
Poetry, short stories.
Life experience.
Life experience. Yeah.
I've written a factual documentary for television, and I'm trying to get it sold.
Oh yeah, I haven't even put TV stuff on the list because it's very daunting. But let's do that. Anyone else?
I'm writing a novel,
Okay.
trying to.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I've self-published a non-fiction fiction novel, and I'm working on plays, and I also want to get into TV writing as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes.
I know there's a development in e-writing and stuff appearing, and I'm interested in that kind of.
Okay.
That's completely new for me.
Yeah, sure. Is there any other kind of aspect of the writing industry or industries that anyone else is interested? Like almost just said, she'd like to talk about e-publishing and I guess the internet and how that's affected writing.
I do love theatre. I love the collaborative nature of it and writing for the performance. But I'd like to know more about where the opportunities might be and how you get in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Also, how to get skilled at converting stories that you write into theatre and other stuff like that as well.
Okay. If I don't cover that, remind me later on because that's a really good point.
Self-published versus...
Yeah. Yeah. So generally, people are interested in the publishing industry, yeah? Yeah. Okay. Cool. We can talk about that. And theatre, I guess a lot of you being involved in theatre, interested in writing theatre and getting involved in that. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, I'm just going to push on and just talk about all of these different things. So on the left-hand side of this board, long day already. I've written down different forms of writing. So in theatre, we have 10-minute plays, which is obviously what Short+Sweet deals with, and that's something that's become quite popularised as a consequence of Short+Sweet and the many other bodies that have popped up around the country and around the world that deal with 10-minute theatre. One-act plays is obviously something that's maybe 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes even a little longer, 20 to 40 minutes in duration. There's less of a market for one-act plays than 10-minute plays, but it's certainly something that's still out there. Full-length plays as well, obviously that's a pretty major market and certainly the only commercial market in the country. And even internationally, there's not really much money in 10-minute theatre. So if you're looking at becoming professional and trying to make a living out of writing, then, or out of theatre writing, then you're probably looking at full-length works ultimately. Short fiction, generally considered a work up to maybe 3,000 to 5,000 words, just a piece of prose, a written piece. A novella, the definition varies depending on who you ask, but a novella is generally considered something around 20,000 words, maybe up to 40 or 50,000 words. but I'd say that these days 50,000 words is pretty much accepted as a novel. A novel is anything above that. Typically 80 to 120,000 words is what the kind of industry considers a novel, but it varies hugely. And there are books out there like War and Peace and Infinite Jest and many others which are well over 500,000 words. Books that have taken people 10 years to write, and it takes about, I don't know, 20% of that time to read. Non-fiction stuff like biographies, autobiographies, self-help cookbooks, factual history. Who said they'd written something? Yeah. And what's yours about feelings? What's the topic?
Oh, it spans 100 years on the dealing with the people who created the Green Revolution.
Mm-hmm. Great. Hey mate, come in and grab a seat. Yeah, yeah. Children's now, the general distinction, of course, with a piece of writing. Hi guys, come on in, grab a seat. With a piece of writing, you can more or less do whatever you want. And while it might not be accepted by the industry as an industry standard, that doesn't mean you can't go out of the normal boundaries of what the industry thinks of as a certain category. Children's books tend to be categorised as picture books for the young kids, then illustrated children's books for something which is a bit more 50% writing, 50% pictures, and then young adult fiction, which is maybe 8 to 10 up until about the age of 16. So Harry Potter, for example, is not a children's book, it's young adult fiction. And quite frankly, hey, come on and grab a seat. Quite frankly, the later books in that series were really just adult books. I'm sure, who hasn't read Harry Potter? I would suggest reading Harry Potter not because it's the best book in the world, but because it is the highest selling book in history that is not prescribed by a religion. So if you want to see what's really successful out there, that's a good starting place. And it's always an interesting exercise to read something that's incredibly popular, even if it's not your cup of tea, because you can then get an idea of what the industry might be looking for. Or yeah, please don't read 50 Shades of Grey. You will want to kill yourself. It's true. Poetry. Everyone knows. I'm not really so much into poetry, and I think everyone knows what poetry is. But in terms of making a career out of it, that's probably the most difficult form of writing. So if you're after an easy career, I would not recommend poetry. Journalism and writing articles, that side of non-fiction, is probably the easiest way to make a career as a writer. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of journalists in New South Wales alone, or Australia, I don't know. There are lots of journalists out there, and they're all making a full-time salary from writing. Whereas creative fiction doesn't, how many people do you reckon are making a living just writing novels? Serious question. 3? Yeah. There'd be dozens, but maybe hundreds, really not that many.
But journalism has changed a lot.
Yeah, journalism's changed, but we'll talk about that in a bit. There's a subcategory of journalism, really tabloid and opinion pieces, and I guess reviews kind of fit into that category as well. There's also TV writing, screenplays, writing TV series, writing movies, that kind of thing, which is probably even below poetry in terms of how likely you are to be successful doing this. Writing a TV series, if you can get on board as something like Neighbours as a Neighbours writer, well, there are opportunities on that side of television. But if you want to try to get a movie produced, well, good luck with that. Also, there are many other forms of writing, things like song lyrics, which don't really go alone, they are part of songs. John?
Why do you say good luck with that?
Good luck with that?
Yeah,
because it's incredibly difficult, but I can talk about that in a sec if you like. I will, okay. Technical writing, so writing manuals, instruction manuals, I don't know, at IKEA, something like that. Comics, graphic novels, any other stuff like that. Who can think of anything that I've missed? There are probably dozens of different forms.
Commercial writing?
Yeah, writing commercials.
Copywriting?
Sorry?
Copywriting?
Copywriting. Yeah, writing copy. I I have to do that as part of my job, and I suck at that. I hate it.
Advertising.
Yeah, advertising, copywriting, commercials, all very similar kind of thing. I mean, there are plenty more, but let's not worry about those. Screenplays, I'll talk about them in brief. I've never really bothered going down the screenplay road because, to me, writing a piece of theatre or a screenplay is something that does not stand alone. People don't read screenplays, they watch movies. The script itself is not really the main thing, it's the final product. Same with theatre. People who are active actors and people who are interested in the theatre world will certainly read scripts, but it's written to be performed, it's not written to be read. So with something like a screenplay, I wouldn't waste my time on it unless I thought there was a good chance that it was actually going to be produced, because to me it might take me 6 months to write a good screenplay, and then how's it going to be produced? Who will produce it? It's all about, in film and television, being connected is really, really important. What do you do with your screenplay? You could send it to a production company. How many screenplays do you think they receive? Hundreds and hundreds, probably several daily at least. Any major production company, like think of the big studios in the US, they wouldn't even look at anything unless it's come through an agent or someone they already know, because they would just get millions and millions of submissions, and it would just be a waste of their time. That said, I have had a couple of plays optioned as screenplays. I've had people pay for the rights to do a screenplay version of them, but that's something that I haven't really personally been involved in. I've just sold them the right and the capability of doing that. So for me, doing screenplays is something that if you're really keen, you would get a team together and film a short, probably as a starting point, something like a Trop Fest, or for a film festival, maybe a 20-minute film. But to me, it's part of the greater package of production and not just writing a script. The only reason I would personally write a screenplay is if someone optioned me to do it, they paid me to do it, or I was personally keen to produce it. Yeah. Okay. So I think a few of us wanted to know about opportunities for theatre writing, yeah? Who'd like to, I know the point was not to talk about 10-minute plays so much, but who is interested in perhaps some other opportunities for writing 10-minute plays? Yeah, a few people, cool. I'll just talk through it really quickly. Over the last maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I think with Short+Sweet creating such an impact in the world of short theatre, a lot of other events have popped up around the state and around the country in particular, revolving around the 10-minute form. Without going into too much detail, I can just give you the names of some of these things and you can look them up yourself. There is Crash Test Drama. Crash Test Drama is a play reading event held at this theatre. Throughout the year we get 10 plays per month, and we do them as a moved reading. We do all the casting on the night, and the actors have 90 minutes to put it together and then do a live performance in front of an audience. That's a really great way to get your work tested. So if you've written a 10-minute play, Crash Test Drama is always looking for work. Just Google it. There's a website, crashtestdrama.com. I actually run the event as well, so yes. Script in Hand, as part of Actors Anonymous. That's another event which is very similar to Crash Test Drama. It's a play reading event. They accept submissions of 10 or even 20-minute plays. They're a bit more relaxed on the time limit there. And you can send them your stuff, and then they'll get actors and directors together and they'll perform it in front of an audience.
But it doesn't have to be a complete play in 20 minutes to be part of it.
Exactly. So as Pete says, it doesn't have to be a full play. It could be an excerpt from a full-length play. It could be a work in progress. That they're a lot more relaxed about the content. Hey there, come on in, grab a seat.
There's also competitions around the world and other places where
Yep.
just look it up on Google and you
Thanks. So of course there are many competitions, and just doing a good Google search is a good way to find things. What's the one that Deb Bradshaw runs?
Not quite, no.
Not Quite Cabaret. Not Quite Cabaret is another event that's popped up which deals with 10-minute plays. They do 3 or 4 seasons a year and put put on about 6 plays, and that's always quite good value. Playtime is something that used to exist.
And there's also like, there's women's ones, there's queer ones, according out. So
Yeah.
you've got ones that's for them to specific.
Okay, yep. So, of course, if you have a specifically themed something or other, then you can search that out. Basically, if you could find a lot of this stuff on Google, like any kind of competition or event, just look it up and you'll certainly find something that's out there. There's something in Victoria called Little Gems. There's another one for you, Little Gems. They're pretty good. It's a $5 entry fee. They allow 3 plays per writer. They shortlist 20 plays and do readings of 20, and they do a full performance of 10 plays, and they also publish those 10 plays as a single publication. So there's an opportunity there.
Little Gems.
Little Gems. Gems. If you just do a Google search for 10-minute plays, there's a website, 10minuteplays.com. Good luck getting your work on that. The guy's probably gets harassed by lots of writers, but I got a play on that website, and I've since had about 30, 40 productions of that play, because it's the highest ranking 10-minute play website in the world. If you write 10-minute plays, it's the first hit in Google, so anyone who's looking for 10-minute plays will probably stumble across that. Just don't tell him that I sent you there, because he'll probably get really angry at me. And then he'll take my play off. Don't do that. Don't do that. But yeah, that's 10-minute plays really. I'm not going to focus on that more. One-act plays are about the same. There are plenty of events and competitions around Australia and internationally which focus on that time limit. I'll talk about that in a bit when I talk about career advancement, but basically one of the best things you can do as a writer to get your name out there is start by entering competitions. You can just build up a CV, you can build credibility. Did you have a question about that? Yeah.
You were saying that 10minuteplays.com, and you're one of the top players, or top player that's been performed many times. Besides just getting your name out there, are there any other benefits by getting your play performed so much?
Well, exposure. I mean, all the benefits that come with having a play produced. You get an audience, you get exposure, you might have an audience member or a cast member from the play go and then look you up and find more of your work. I've had people find that play on that website, look me up, and then they've seen all my other plays, and then they've wanted to produce something else. So probably as a result of having that play on that one website, maybe 40, 50% of my productions have come from that. I would say Short+Sweet and that one website would account for 80% of my productions. Full-length plays. Who's written a full-length play? Wow. Who's had that full-length play produced? Just one. Who wants to get their full-length play produced? And who's like sent it around somewhere and no one wants to produce it? Who just hasn't bothered? Who wants to get it produced but they haven't sent it around and just hope that, I don't know, someone will steal their laptop and then find their play and send it to the STC. Anyway, getting a full-length play produced is very, very difficult. With a 10-minute play, there are lots of opportunities out there. There are lots of events. Something like Short+Sweet, well, we produced 175 plays this season, so there are 175 opportunities. You look at something like the Sydney Theatre Company, how many plays do they produce per year? 6, 8? Something like that? Does anyone know? I'm just guessing. No? It's not that many, let's put it that way, because they're going to do a 4 to 6 week season, they have to prepare it. Yeah, maybe they do a dozen plays at the most. Obviously, there's already that disparity there. They're also very selective because when you cut the pool down from 170 down to 10, they're going to be using Shakespeare, classics, famous Australian writers, someone like David Williamson. He gets a play produced every year in every major theatre company just because he sells. When you're looking at commercial theatre, they have to make their money. There's not much money in theatre at the best of times. Even commercial theatres, yeah, they might make good money, but no one is really making a fortune out of that. Even Sydney Theatre Company, because of the size of who they are, they have a lot more staff, and their staff, they're all salaried. They're making a living from it, but I don't think anyone's creaming $500,000 a year out of running the STC. I mean, who runs the Sydney Theatre Company? Kate Blanchett. Do you reckon she's making her money from the STC or maybe from the movies where she gets paid millions of dollars? So it's really not about money. But the point is that if you're an unknown writer, that is a huge risk for a commercial theatre company. Even if your play is amazing, it's still a risk because they're going to look at that and their first question is, who is going to want to watch this? They can market it as much as they want, but if you say, hey, Macbeth, am I not allowed to say that in a theatre? Okay, I'll do that later. I did that on the way in just in case I accidentally said Macbeth. I ran around the lot, okay? Now what am I saying? I've sidetracked myself with this.
It's a risk.
It's a big risk, yeah. I mean, it's so easy. When you're producing a Shakespeare, everyone knows Shakespeare. And there's a huge market for that. People want to go and see Shakespeare, even if they've read it or seen it a dozen times. But who wants to go and see a play by Pete Malicki? Oh, you guys are so sweet. Thanks, Pat.
I saw it 3 times.
Yeah, Pat's awesome. Here's a note. If you ever produce a play, call up this man Pat because he is a theatre aficionado and he loves going to see stuff. So, you've got to find yourself an audience as well. So I'd suggest giving Pat a comp because if he likes the play, he'll promote it really hard and he'll put the word around and he'll get people going along. But that's kind of a different story. So the point is that there are very few opportunities for full-length plays, and the best thing you can do if you want to get your play staged is stage it yourself. Who knows the Sydney Fringe Festival? Most of you, great. The Sydney Fringe Festival is a very good example of a place where pretty much anyone can go and put on their own work. There are huge costs involved. If you're producing your own play, you have to pay for venue, you have to pay for a degree of advertising, tickets, any advertising that you do yourself, so any printing, postcards. What other costs are there?
Hiring of lights and sound.
Yeah, any kind of equipment, set, costumes. Rehearsal space can be a huge cost as well. If you have a full-length play, you want to rehearse it for 2 months. Maybe how many hours in total? You might do 3 sessions a week, 12 hours a week for a few months, times that number by the average cost of rehearsal space, which is probably $20, maybe upwards of that. Already you could be spending well over $1,000 in rehearsal space. Basically, it's not something that you would ever do to make money. I put the play that I had published, Room, on. Well, I didn't put it on. Alison up the back did. She was the producer/director. She put the play on in the Sydney Fringe, and we're probably like around the break-even mark with an audience of 400. And that's a pretty good audience for a Fringe festival. So you wouldn't do it for the money, yeah?
One of the ways you can not be out of pocket, please, if you don't make it, is start looking at your local council, find out, because there is funding. That's how I got some funding.
Yeah.
So like Parramatta has festivals on. I know Marathon does. Find out what your local council, and there will be funding in there. They get funded
But
through the Arts Council.
the funding, they say it's about 5,000, but nobody gets voted. It's about 2,000.
Yes, but at least you
Anyway,
get your work on
guys,
without spending too much money.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
It's worth it.
We can talk about that later. There are many ways to make money. You can fundraise. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that it's a costly exercise.
Yes.
Even if you have a decent audience, you'll break even. You might make a few $100 each. You probably want to pay your cast if you're that kind of person. As a writer, well, you might be lucky to make, if you're super successful, you might make $1,000 and you'll put a lot of your heart and soul into it. You don't do it for the money. The point is you're doing it to create an opportunity for your work to get out there. Reviews, building an audience, getting your name out, all of those things that come along with that. You might win an award. This copy cannot be sold because it says it's a recipient of the Fringe Award for Excellence, which was, I think, prematurely printed, because that's not what this won. What did it win, a finalist award or something? Yeah, in the category. But I actually got Room published after having it performed in the Sydney Fringe. I invited Marcus, who runs the King Street Theatre here, to come and review it because he also reviews for Sydney Arts Guide, I believe. He was going to come, he couldn't make it. He did ask to read the script, he read it, he loved it, he published it. So that's probably quite an exceptional case that you'll send someone a script and they'll go and actually print it for you. But that's the kind of thing that can happen. And I got some pretty amazing reviews out of that. What I've done is put together a package to send to commercial theatre companies around the world, which has some production photos and the reviews, and it's basically just like an advertising sheet for production companies to try to sell the show to them. And I can send that with a really nice printed copy of the script. And if I pay the wholesale price for this, it's not too expensive. And hopefully get future productions out of that. So think if you're trying to get the full-length play produced, you can produce it yourself, you might not make any money. In terms of your overall career advancement, which is something I guess I'm going to be talking about while I talk about all these things naturally anyway, it's a really good stepping stone to the next thing. So don't expect that you can just get produced by the Sydney Theatre Company. It might happen. I'm sure it happens sometimes. They run a competition, for example, the Patrick White Award. It's an annual competition. They publish and produce the winning play, and it's a $10,000 prize. So going into that with your full-length play, you might win it, you never know. That's a really good start to your writing career. There's also, what's the other major playwriting prize in this country? Anyone? The Griffin Theatre Award, that's a pretty good one too. They will produce your play and it's a $10,000 prize. So that's a really good thing to have on your radar, those two awards. The Patrick White Award and the Griffin Theatre Award are both ones to look out for. If you search hard enough through Google, you'll find dozens, if not thousands, of similar awards around the world for various lengths and genres and blah, blah, blah. Does anyone have any questions about that whole thing?
I was just going to say another outlet for getting your play produced and performed is to hook up with your local theatre company.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I'll talk about that in networking. I'm going to talk a little bit about the publishing industry now. I think there are quite a few people who are interested in that, so I'll just kind of give it an overview, and then I think I'll talk about this career advancement stuff and better ways of getting your work out there. And then we'll probably open up to questions. Publishing. So publishing is something you can do for theatre, but it's geared more towards the fiction and non-fiction industry, so writing books. Essentially, who was interested in books or? Cool. A bit of an overview of the industry. There's traditional publishing, which is when a publishing house like Penguin or Pan Macmillan picks up your work and publishes it and sells it for you and pretty much does everything. Vanity publishing and self-publishing are very similar. They just have a slightly different model. Vanity publishing is where you essentially pay a company to do each aspect of the publication process. So you have layout, you have cover design, you have editing, distribution, actual selling, getting them into bookstores. You can break the process down into many smaller steps. And vanity publishing is essentially where you pay for some or all of those steps to be done by another company. The problem with vanity publishing is that they have no motivation to actually sell your work because they charge you for the process. They don't get, or they don't necessarily get money per sale. And if they don't get a commission, then they have really very little interest in selling your work other than to get a good reputation as a good business so that other people will use them as clients. The sad thing is, however, there are enough people who are either ignorant of the industry or just too desperate to get their work out there that they will generally give these people enough business that they can survive. And e-publishing is a form of self-publishing really, or it's a facet of the overall publishing industry now. So traditional publishing the way that this process works, who's completed a novel or a non-fiction? Okay, that's pretty cool, there are a few of you. Essentially, you submit your work directly to them. I'll just call it a novel, even though it's pretty much the same for non-fiction. You submit it, they review it. If they're interested, they will offer you a publishing deal. The problem with the industry is, or the problem for writers in the industry is that there are, again, there are so many people trying to do it and very few opportunities. If you look at the finances of the industry, and I think it's really important to understand how this basically works so you can understand why the industry is so reluctant to publish by traditional means, so actually printing the book. Having run a publishing company, the costs are actually quite surprising. You hear that authors get about 10%. Who's heard that figure before? Yeah? Yeah, that is about right. That's industry standard, is the author gets 10% of sales. So would you naturally assume then that the publisher is making a lot of money out of that? Yeah? No? No? Yeah? Maybe? No opinion? Who reckons the publisher's going to be making a decent amount of money? Who reckons the money's going elsewhere? Yeah. Well, it does depend on the case. If it's a large enough scale, the publisher will be making good money. However, yeah, the publisher actually makes a very small amount of money. What happens is, once a book's printed, it gets distributed. So it goes to a company whose job it is to physically ship it around to different bookstores and get them to sell it. Distributors often work directly with booksellers or as booksellers, and essentially they will take a bulk price. So let's say your book costs $30, the distributor might charge $20-something, $22 per copy, which leaves maybe $7 or $8 for the publisher. The publisher has the costs of running a business, all their staff, editing it, doing all the layout, physically printing it, actually paying for the copies to be done, and then the author. So in that $8 profit, the author's getting $3, the publisher has $5 before costs, after costs. Help me out here.
After, I'm pretty sure it's after.
Thank you. Yeah, so they're getting $5 a copy, but they've also had to pay for all their other costs. So the publisher, in many cases, might get less than the author. So it's really not that great a business to be in. And the publishing industry has been struggling for the last maybe 5 years or even a little longer because they didn't catch the e-book wave soon enough. And there are many companies out there like Amazon who are doing a lot better with e-publishing, and it's making it even more difficult for traditional publishers. In terms of printing, from having paid for a book to be printed myself, you can change the cost depending on many factors. It depends on the cover that you use. If you use hardcover, soft cover, glossy coloured front cover, or just a plain black and white cover, obviously the cover has to be good, because what's that old expression?
You can't judge a book by its cover.
Thank you. Yeah, you can't judge a book by its cover, but everyone does. That's the exact point. You have to have a nice looking cover. It has to be an attractive design. It is actually, it can be like 20-25% of the cost of the book, depending on other things, which is pretty ridiculous. What paper stock you use, where you get it printed. You can go overseas. Printing in China is dirt cheap. I got my book printed in Australia. I wanted to support Australian business, and I also printed it on FSC paper, which is forest certified, because I wanted to support the environment rather than dodgy Chinese industry, which is going to pollute and all of that. So it cost me, I printed 1,000 copies of my book, and it cost me something like $6.60 a copy. So if you look at that that profit margin, I sold my book for $25 initially. When you look at that profit margin, if I was a publisher, I've actually lost money. So if I was doing it that way, I couldn't afford to print that small number of copies. So essentially, a publisher only wants to do something in bulk, because the more you do, the cheaper it is. The publisher's probably thinking they want to do a minimum of 10,000, if you're talking about just fiction, they probably want to do a minimum of 10,000 copies so that it's economically viable. With an unknown author, the idea of selling 10,000 books is actually not an easy thing to achieve. Unless they're selling a Harry Potter or a major commercial fiction, something you buy at an airport, there isn't a huge profit margin in it for them. So generally the publishers are much more concerned about looking at authors they know will sell, such as an established author or a celebrity or someone who has some reason that they're going to sell a book. Did anyone here know that Pamela Anderson is a fiction author? Dead true.
Sure.
No, she wrote an adult fiction book. I'm pretty sure she got it ghostwritten. Does anyone not know what that means? Okay, good. One person wrong. Ghostwriting is when someone writes your book and basically puts your name on it. Great example is Jackie Chan's autobiography. I remember reading that. He can barely speak English, but his autobiography is written in English. In that case, it says, whatever it is, My Life by Jackie Chan, and it says with somebody. That with is the person who actually wrote the book. In most cases with ghostwriters, they don't get named at all. It's just something that happens. And there have been rumours that some major authors, I can never remember who this is, but I've heard that I think John Grisham or maybe Robert Ludlum or one of those kind of major international authors actually get other people, have put their name on other people's work. Don't quote me on that, don't sue me. Yeah?
Controversy that she had a team of writers working on her because there's no way she could produce that much
Right.
material on her own.
Yeah, so there you go, speculation that Enid Blyton didn't write all of her own stuff. I mean, it certainly happened in the history. It certainly happened in the history of writing that, major authors have had other people write their books, basically, and they've put their name on it. And the obvious reason is because people are going to buy a Robert Ludlum, even if it's written by someone like Pete Malicki, because who's going to sell more books?
English.
Thank you. Pay you later. Anyway, so that's traditional publishing. It's just incredibly difficult. The industry standard response is we will not look at your manuscript if you are not already published, which obviously if you're not, how do you start? Or you have a literary agent. Now, a literary agent, basically their job is to try to get your work published. So they are an intermediary between yourself and the publisher. They get 10% of what you get, which is already not very much. So let's think of you sell 5,000 copies of a book at $30 a pop. That's, someone do maths for me?
You get $3 as an author.
Yep, $3 times 5.
And they get 30 cents, the literary agent gets 30 cents.
Yeah, basically. So you get $15,000 and they get $1,500. How much money is that for someone? That's maybe their office rent for a fortnight. Like, a literary agent is not really interested in publishing something that's going to sell even 5,000 copies. And in Australia, 5,000 copies is a bestseller. So it's really hard to get your foot in the door with the publishing industry. For the basic finances of the industry, it's just really, really hard to crack into it because they're so reluctant to take a risk. I've had publishers make comments along the lines of, this is, this book could win this major literary award, but the market's just so tough at the moment, we're not going to touch it. A major literary agent said the same thing to me. She said, you can point a nya at me when you win the Vogel Prize or the ABC Fiction Award, which are two of the biggest new fiction awards in the country. So, she even thought that I had obviously some potential, even if she was just being nice. She thought I had some potential, but she still didn't want to take me on as a client. So I don't begrudge that. That's just a fact of the industry, and it just shows how tough it is.
And yet there's never been more publishing in the world. So many books come out every week. It's strange.
Yeah, that's true as well. Anyway, so I went down a whole self-publishing road. So I started my own publishing company. I produced a few titles, one of them being my own fiction novel. Financially, I paid, in the end, probably about $10,000 and have made maybe $3,000–4,000 back, but I still have 800 copies of the book there. So in the long run, over the rest of my life, I might make that money back, but I currently have no room in my laundry. So it's a bit of a way off thing. And I was actually going to bring some copies of my book and sell it, but I forgot to do that. So when we're talking about career advancement, that's a poor move.
Yes.
If you ever run a workshop, always bring your book to sell it. Don't forget that. Yeah.
A lot of the self-publishing now, because I've only just done recently, it's pretty much print on demand, so you don't have to really print those thousands of copies. They just get printed as they're ordered. So that means there's no outlay, which is good.
Yep, true. Print on demand. That's what Room is. Room is print on demand. It's kind of more tied into e-publishing these days. It's what a lot of e-publishers do. Or internet-based publishers, I should say. Something like Lulu. Has anyone heard of Lulu?
Yeah.
Lulu is a pretty major online book publisher. Anyone can publish their work for free. Anyone can get it printed, and it's done on a print-on-demand basis. So you can just pay whatever the cost is, and they will print it that way. Obviously, I don't want to go into the whole market forces conversation beyond what I've already done. The industry is changing. The way people buy things in society is changing. We're more geared towards buying online and slightly less retail, so that has a huge impact on every industry, including publishing. Going into a bookstore, obviously, if you don't see a book on a shelf, you're not going to buy it. You're not going to go in there and it says, order this now and we'll post it to you in 2 weeks. No one's going to bother doing that, but the internet, that's how it works. So with print on demand, it's very easy to do that with an online setting, because whether the book is already printed and sitting in a warehouse or whether it has to be printed when you order, it doesn't really make a big difference to them. It might delay your shipping time by a few days or even a week or two. But at the end of the day, when you pay for something online, you might expect, who would expect, something you buy online take a week or two? That's about standard, yeah? Yeah, so that's about what it's going to take anyway. So it's a lot easier for that to happen. And print on demand, for those of you who don't know, is quite simply when they don't have the book printed at all. When someone buys it, it gets printed. There is obviously less risk doing it that way, but the process is much more expensive on a per book basis. If you do offset printing, which is where they, build I forget what it's called, the template-y thing, and then print it, the more you print, the cheaper it is. With print on demand, there is no difference between 1 copy and 10,000 copies. Digital printing, essentially. Anyway, try not to go too much into the market forces side of things. E-publishing is the evolution of the industry now. That's where things have gone towards. Traditional publishers are struggling because they didn't, as I said, jump on the e-publishing boat soon enough, and now they're not the major players. So you've got things like Amazon, which is really just an online store. That's now the biggest book publisher in the world, and probably making a lot more money than your major publishing companies like Pan Macmillan and Random House and Penguin and all of those guys around the world. E-publishing is something that anyone can do as well. There's Lulu is a website I mentioned earlier, also Smashwords. Write that down, everyone. One word, smashwords.com. Smashwords is a great website. I prefer it to Lulu, personally.
Why?
I'll tell you. You can put your work on Smashwords, and they have automatic systems which review the work and tell you what you need to do to change the layout to make it more appropriate for an ebook format. So when I write, for example, I use Microsoft Word. When I do a new paragraph, I hit enter and space, space, space. And that's how I start my paragraphs. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you're talking about ebooks, that actually makes a big difference. They want you to use styles, so they want you to use paragraph style. When you hit enter, it creates a new paragraph automatically, rather than manually adding in spaces. Smashwords, when you post your book there, you can upload it as a PDF. It will detect things like that, and it will tell you what you need to do to make it in a better format. And they have what they call the premium catalogue for things which match their formatting correctly, and that automatically goes through Amazon and many other online retailers. So if you go to the trouble of getting your book right, and with the one book I put on Smashwords, I never managed to achieve that because it kept making me make changes, and I got frustrated and quite possibly destroyed some furniture in my house. No, there was a problem because I was the publisher but not the author, and my account name was under my name and not the author's name, and they just basically wouldn't accept it. It was just an irritating little thing, but I could never get it in the premium catalogue. However, Smashwords is really, really good. You can put your stuff up there for free if you want, so if you want to do it just on the basis of getting your work out there, that's a great way to do it. You can then send a link to your book around via email, put it on a website, put it on your Facebook page, whatever, and at the very least you can start getting read. You can sell your book for any nominated price as an ebook, or as a print-on-demand thing as well. I'm not sure how Smashwords does print-on-demand, but certainly as an ebook you can set it at $1. And there are some people who have made a career out of writing books of various quality, selling it for $1, managing to find an audience, selling 200,000 copies of the book. They get maybe 50-60% of that. They've made $100 grand from one book, which is amazing money for a fiction book. And there are other people who, or some of those people have done a whole series, and they only need to have 100,000 people buy their book for $1, and that happens with 10 books, and they're a millionaire. That's actually probably the easiest way to make money. The obvious difficulty with that is that everyone's doing it now. The market is absolutely flooded. So if you put your ebook on Smashwords or Lulu or one of the thousands of other ebook sites, everyone else is doing it too. So how do you stand out above all of these other people? You might be on the home page for a few days with something like Smashwords. You know, whoever posts their book will go on the home page if the category or whatever. But there are so many people posting that might only last for 5 minutes or until they update the website next. Did you have a question or?
Oh, no.
I think that's a pretty decent overview of that. Does anyone have any questions on?
Actually, I was going to relate to social media now. That'd be your key use. So you've got your work out there, and then social media becomes such a large part of your job as a writer.
Sure.
Is that something you focus on yourself, or?
I'll talk about that now. If anyone has any other questions about publishing, e-publishing, or
What about things like audiobooks and audio podcasts and stuff like that?
Okay, good question. There are websites where you can post an audiobook that you've done yourself. The good thing about technological advancements is that it's pretty easy to create your own audiobook. Most laptops have built-in mics. The quality is pretty crap, but you can just read your book and record it. You can use really basic editing software, and you can put a short story up online, or even a full novel if you have the time, or even just getting a cheap microphone that will work with a laptop. I guess it's similar to the whole e-publishing thing in that there are many people doing this now. There are lots of blogs, particularly things like WordPress and Blogger. People will create their own writing blogs, or forums, internet forums. They'll create a forum, and you can very easily post things like an audio recording of a short story, something like that. But again, there's saturation. So a lot of people are trying to do it. Therefore, how do you become known above those other people? And I'll talk about that in this section. Does anyone have any other questions on publishing? Yes.
When you put the thing on Smashwords or Lulu or something, you're basically just putting up the title and the description, maybe a copy of the picture of the thing. What if they have to buy the book? Then otherwise they can't read it until they buy it.
Yeah,
so why would they want to buy it? They have to have a story told about it, right? A synopsis or.
Yeah, those websites you can actually determine how much of a percentage of the book you give as a preview. So if it's a short book, you can say 25%, and the first 25% of the book will be available as a preview. so then they can read and see if they like it and buy it.
Right.
Is there any word limit on those? So you could write like a book that was 20 words long if you wanted to, or a book.
You could write a 20-word book, sure,
Okay.
but yeah, tell me how you go with that.
I was just
No, yeah, theoretically yes, it can be basically anything. You could sell a picture book, it doesn't have to have words, it could be any PDF that you create. The real challenge is finding a way of selling it. You can be one of those lucky people who the website identifies for whatever reason and picks it up and sells it for you, but with hundreds of books being posted daily, it's up to you to do your own sales and marketing. So I guess if I was to make one overall point, if you want to make it as a writer, you have to be as much business person as you do writing.